Welcome all, it's Mike here, and today on our behind the scenes journey, I thought we'd try something a bit different. We recently released episode 16 and the single The Show featuring the amazing Blue Stahli. We also put out a behind the scenes video going deeper and exploring the music session with Bret himself, so check that out if you haven't seen it already. The episode has lots of interesting visual elements going on, so I thought why not take a moment to delve and look a bit more closely at the animation side of things, some further insight into how the X-RL7 episodes come together. A quick note that if you'd like to support the series, one awesome way to do that is via Patreon, where we have lots of cool rewards, exclusive music, extra behind the scenes, and much more. Also feel free to hit us up on Discord and chill with us and some of the X-RL7 community and cast. Right, so let's get into it in this episode of X-RL7 Backstage. So before we focus in on the Ghost XD elements, I'd like to give you a very quick basic outline of the processes involved in making an episode, which I could go into much more detail on and would like to do in the future. But essentially, an episode starts first with writing the script. If there's a song involved, I'll write a demo, and 99% of the songwriting starts from my trusty acoustic. Once I've sent the script out and dialogue comes in from the various awesome voice actors, and I've recorded my parts and Roggers has been in, then it's on to the first phase of editing. I typically ask artists to do 3 takes of each line. I found it's really helpful to have options available, as I often go through and stitch pieces of different takes together, Frankensteining up the ultimate take, or if you want the technical term, vocal comping. I'll draw the assets and backgrounds in a program called Hexels, import those into the animation program I use, which is Toon Boom Harmony Essentials, along with all the dialogue, which I have on separate tracks, so it's easy for me to move dialogue around, overlap various audio as the scene develops, and what works timing-wise becomes clear. And lip syncing I do manually. Animation is definitely the longest process. It can take hours to do something that's on the screen for only a few seconds, but that's just the nature of animation. From Toon Boom, the scene is exported and loaded into Adobe Premiere, where I piece the episode together, meticulously add sound effects and various subtle little edits here and there, effects-wise to bring out certain parts of the scene, which we'll talk about shortly. Okay, that's the basic flow. I haven't talked much about the music and the editing involved there, or the part that's most mentally health challenging for me, getting things mixed. One of the few elements I outsource, which is a whole other story. Why doesn't it sound like this? And even backstage videos, like this one, or lyric videos, there's lots of stuff happening. Anyway, on to the Ghost XD scenes. Right, so I've got Toon Boom in front of me, and we're just gonna dive in and have a look at various aspects of the animation. I suppose one thing to talk about right away is how I handle character animation and dialogue animation.
And X-RL7? Come on, what does that even mean?
So it's an amazing performance from Bret in this episode as Ghost XD, and how I typically handle dialogue is throughout the entire line, throughout the entire sentence, I'm thinking, what is the character feeling and thinking at this point? Are there words, are there expressions congruent with what they're saying? Are they trying to hide something? Are they being genuine? And all the way through the line, this can change depending on the performance and the dialogue itself. So the main way I show that is through the eyebrows and the eyes. So for example, on the eyebrows here, there's lots of different variations which come into play to express different feelings and emotions, and also the eyes, straight looking at you, closed, look to the side, narrow a little bit, or a little bit goofy. And with the mouth, mostly the mouth just has what's required for the lip sync.
What does that even mean?
But I do have like a version where I can nudge it up and we've got a smile.
What does that even mean? What does that even mean?
Listening to the performance from the voice actor, you can usually tell certain points of the performance which have certain accents or certain punctuations where it feels like there should be emotion there. For example, here.
7? Come on, what does that even mean?
So when he says "come on," it feels like he's getting closer. It feels like it's there's some motion to that. So how I'll do that is I'll get the point with "come on," on the part where I feel it's got the most energy, I'll find that and then base the movement around that. And one cool thing you can do here with 2D is because in this scene, Ghost XD is facing us. He's got a front angle of him. And one way to create the illusion of 3D with 2D objects is to change the size of different things. So with his face, as he's getting closer, his head is basically increasing in size to give us that vibe of he's getting right in our grill, you know? And one thing I love doing is I love doing an anticipation where just before he's coming in, you see him backing off and actually getting a little bit smaller, and then boom, he comes in with the line and then just pulls back slightly to correct himself, like a bit of an overshoot. And I really love doing that for my characters.
My manager says I'm way too impulsive. Actually, it was his idea.
Yes, but I told you to feud with an artist on our roster.
Very much thinking of what the characters are feeling when they're not actually speaking, how they're reacting to what's being said or the environment around them. My favorite example in this episode is this scene.
Yes, but
Here we see Razor enters, and if you're following the series, Alfie and Razor have a bit of a history. So it's a bit of a big deal that they're kind of being reunited in this episode, I suppose. And we see as soon as Razor comes on the scene,
yes, but
Alfie like straight away reacts into surprise and shock. So we see him like recoil there.
Yes, but I told you to feud
Which then
with an
turns
artist
to
on
anger.
our roster. And
Omega is aware of this. He's a little bit concerned about Alfie, so then he takes a peek to make sure he's
artist
alright.
on our roster. And wait for my
The PJ takes a peek as well, but he's not as concerned as Omega is, so he only has a little look and kind of almost brushes it off. Whereas Omega is a bit more concerned about it, and we actually see him like physically comforting Alfie later on in the scene. Just little things that I think about during animating. One aspect of animating which can be quite tedious and requires some mental discipline is animating leg positions. The way I have my character set up is that once you move the legs, you then have to move the entire body to keep the character in the right position. So as you can see, to do that, I've made some big red lines just to keep track of where the feet originally were, so that when I make a move, I can adjust the character's position back to where most makes sense. It can be fiddly. Maybe there's an easier way of doing this, which I'd love to know. This is just personally the solution I've worked out to do this. And I feel putting the extra effort in here definitely makes the character movements that much richer. So back to like the visual effects.
X-RL7 and their glorious lead singer.
Main effect I'm using here is something called masking. There's lots of glows and things going on, but there's this concept of masking which is called cutting in Toon Boom. For example, here
Glorious.
with this slide, how I'm doing that in Toon Boom is if you look at that object, basically what you've got is you've got this line, it's got a glow attached to it to give it this cyberpunky sheen, and then it's got this it's invisible at the moment, but if I do a copy to make it visible, it's got this object here, this is just a block of color. And what a mask does is this image underneath
And they're glorious.
is when it's in contact with that mask, it won't be visible to us. It just cuts that out. If there was no mask here, boom, you'd see everything. But that just hides that part from us. And masking is used throughout the episode. So these like electronic swooshes, I'm not sure what you call them, these movements, how these are made. So I've basically got these patterns which are made in hexels, very simple, very pixely shapes. And I'm using these shapes in different ways throughout the episode, changing the size and choosing which one I think will fit best. And I'm using it as a cutter, an inverted cutter. So we've actually got a color here, this block of color that's moving around. And it's using this as an inverted mask, so it only appears when it's touching that part of the pattern. So I'm manually kind of moving that around to what makes sense. And then once we've got that there, and it's all in there and looking good, then I'll apply a glow to it after that, so then it's spilling out and giving you that nice glowy kind of vibe. And then on top of that, there's another cutter I've got two glows going on there, and the cutter is basically keeping it once again inside that frame. And then you've got lights going on in the background. There's another one here, in fact, just even on the speech bubble itself, just keeping everything locked in there. Similar thing, boom, remove that, and you can see all the text, boom, lock it back in, sorted.
Helmet breath.
The breath there, I just manually drew each frame, and went old school with that part.
Now, they're going to spiral.
One fun thing here, which you may or may not have caught, is there's some instruments flying around. You've got a guitar there, you've got a microphone there, keyboards, and amplifier. That one went a bit old school. You've got a black attached to a line.
What are feelings? Exterminate! Exterminate!
So this scene, oh man, it's such a great performance from Bret as Ghost XD. It always makes me smile. It's a lot of fun to animate. And it's cool. It's this part where Ghost XD is trying to get in Omega's head, and he's getting more and more intense. And as he gets more intense and the performance gets a little bit more, just ramps up, it felt natural for Ghost XD just to get closer and closer to the screen and get much more in your face.
What are feelings? Exterminate! Exterminate! Restart! Software update required! Obsolete software! Obsolete! Okay.
That's one of those things where you can't really plan it until you hear the dialogue and you just kind of respond to what the voice actor's doing, which is what I did here. I didn't actually plan any of these effects that are going on in the background, these visual things. They just kind of happened in the moment, like when I sat down to actually animate it. We see the word robot appears on the side, and once again we're dealing with 2D, so one thing you can do to further give that illusion of depth is the one you've got supposedly in front, which would be this one, you can make it move a little bit slower than the one behind it, so it's a nice way of giving you that extra 3D-ness without it being 3D. Animating music. So you see a couple of things I usually do is we've got some dry ice here, or my version of dry ice. It's basically some color with some transparency and blur to give you that kind of misty vibe. Some lights going on, some more masking in the background with the show. To grab your short attention, filter light drama, that's one of my favorite little tweaks there. I don't know if you call it a little tear. And Ghost XD speaking to his second microphone just for that one part with the distorted vocal. Yeah, so we got the lights moving in sync with the music there. And yeah, the hardest part of animating music for me personally is mainly guitar, like guitar rhythmic things, especially when you're trying to get the strumming right. Because as you scrobe through the audio, you'll notice it sounds basically sounds like noise, so it can be a bit tricky to pick stuff out. Sometimes I'll use a clean vocal track on its own, a clean guitar track on its own, just so I can hear what's going on and plan the actions to that. So if we look at his arm, what's he up to? There you go. There's it just takes a bit of experimentation to get it right. I like that. There's a bit of an illusion there where once again he's like the arms getting a little bit smaller on one angle, scaling down to give you the illusion that it's raising up. Very subtle. So like when the characters play guitar, I try to make what they're playing in the animation to be quite faithful to what's actually being played on the song. So in a way, as much as you can with pixel art, you can probably work out what the chords are, what's going on, just from watching the animation. So on to Adobe Premiere now, where it all comes together, the scenes are all edited. One very simple thing that I do to make some of the effects pop just a little bit more is actually add a transparent color when certain cyberpunky things happen. So here we've got the slide going on, and as it's on screen doing its thing, as soon as it's there, there's a blue color, and it's at 10% opacity, fully untransparent. This is how it would look. But I just kind of dialed that in to 10, which felt right. And all the time that the slide is happening, it's just on the screen, giving you a bit of blue and fading out.
Glorious lead singer, mysterious frontman Omega. More like Omega, with a 0.
So I do that throughout the scene. There we've got a cheeky blur, which I like to do. Usually when there's a big camera move, I do something like this, where just for those frames, the whole scene just blurs. I get a double of it and just add a little bit of directional blur.
In X-RL7, I challenge you to a music battle this Saturday.
So for this part, GhostXD is challenging X-RL7. We've got the big red text in the back, and I felt I wanted to make this part seem really hot, really energetic, so added some red in the background. And not only that, we've got some red, one layer of red, and another one which is fading in and out to give this kind of sizzly sort of vibe.
Challenge you to a music battle.
If we were to take that out, then this is how it would look.
Challenge you to a music battle.
Which is cool, but check this out.
Challenge you to a music battle this Saturday.
It's subtle, but it just adds that something extra. And the sound effects, of course, we've got an electric sizzle going on and a drone sound, which all add to the atmosphere.
Or are you afraid of the ghost? Details on my website.
So the ghost effect of GhostXD here was achieved by a couple of green screens. So I actually exported that whole section separately with a green background, which looked like this. Keyed that out, so it's transparent, and I've got two versions of it here, which are heavily blurred and transparent and rotated to the side. If I was to take the transparency off, there you go. Similar thing here. If I was to take off the transparency, you can see it there. And this has got heavy blur on it, horizontal blur. If we were to take that off, it would look quite plain. And on top, I see there's a blur of the middle one, which is fading in and kind of taking over everything.
Details on my website.
So it gets really big right at the end, then just cuts out.
This guy is intense.
Yeah, so loading up all the sound effects. Every time a character like folds their arms or touches their body, there's like a touch sound. There's footsteps, different types of footsteps. The trademark of X-RL7, the swings, when the hands move, which I've tried to downplay a little bit in current episodes, but it's still there.
Just roll.
There's a cheeky blur. When there's a fast camera move, I tend to isolate those frames and just give them a little blur in the direction that we're headed. Very subtle, but just adds that little something. So there's another sneaky little blur. Usually when the camera is still or there isn't that much going on, or sometimes when there is, I like to add a little subtle blur in both directions this time, just to give a little bit of extra eye candy while we watch the scene. So once again, to emphasize the heaviness, there's a color layer and it looks like another blur, just to give you that extra bit of movement. Another cheeky blur there. And that's how we do. And once we're all done and all the scenes are there and the timing's all nice, then I usually have an extra sequence on top of this, capturing everything, which I call a master sequence. And just to keep everything nice and smooth, I'll add a compressor and a limiter, just to capture any peaks and just keep things reasonably level volume-wise. And that'll be there for everything except for the music. And there you go. I hope you enjoyed this dive into how X-RL7 is created. There's plenty more to say. I actually cut quite a few things so this video doesn't drag on too long. I'll add a few of those clips to Patreon. In fact, speaking of, if you enjoyed this style of looking over my shoulder into the software sessions, currently on the X-RL7 Patreon there is a breakdown of the song Digital Deities, along with other cool exclusive rewards, so feel free to check that out. And as I mentioned, in the previous Backstage video, Bret goes deep into his session for the song The Show. Shout out to our glorious Patreons, Alodia, Raz, Destra, Johnny, River, Joe, Fumka, Vita, Ali V, Kitu, Kenneth, and Jabal. Thanks so much everyone for all your support, and see you in the next video.